My father disowned me and threatened to dig up my dead mother's grave to sue for her inheritance, all because I finally exposed the sick truth about his new family. He painted me as a jealous monster for not accepting his newborn son. But that innocent baby was actually a pawn in a twisted con to steal millions from my grandparents. I stood by and watched the man I worshipped transform into a stranger who was willing to sell my mother's memory and destroy my life just to pay off his secret debts. I am sitting here shaking, holding the court documents that prove my so-called half-brother does not even share my deoxyribonucleic acid. A fact my father knew and ignored because he loved money more than he respected blood. I thought I was saving him, but I was just feeding a parasite that almost swallowed us whole. Now he is writing me letters from a prison cell, begging for forgiveness, while I am left picking up the pieces of a shattered life. I feel like I have committed the ultimate sin by testifying against my own parent, even though he left me no choice. How do you ever trust anyone again when the person who was supposed to protect you turns out to be the villain? The smell of wet ash is something you never forget. It sticks to the back of your throat, a heavy, acrid taste that no amount of coffee can wash away. I sat in my sedan, the engine idling just enough to keep the heater running against the relentless Seattle drizzle. The windshield wipers moved back and forth with a rhythmic, hypnotic squeak, slicing through the gray afternoon. But they could not wipe away the scene in front of me. My childhood home used to be a sanctuary. It was a sprawling craftsman bungalow nestled in the quiet, leafy suburbs of Queen Anne, a place my late mother had curated with the precision of an artist and the warmth of a saint. Now, it was a crime scene. A strip of yellow police tape fluttered limp in the wind, stretched across the porch railing like a grotesque party streamer. The front windows were boarded up with plywood, but the scorch marks licked up the siding, black tongue marks of the fire that had gutted the living room. My name is Sky. I am 26 years old. I am a freelance graphic designer who spends her days aligning pixels and obsessing over typography, trying to create order out of chaos. It is a laughable profession for someone whose personal life has been a spiraling disaster of messy entanglements. Up until 3 months ago, I thought I had it under control. I lived in a modest studio apartment in Capitol Hill, paid my taxes, and tried to navigate the minefield that was my family with what I thought was diplomacy. I was the bridge, the peacemaker, the good daughter. God, I was such a fool. I looked at the charred remains of the house. Technically, my name was on the deed. My mother had left it to me and my older sister, Ava, in her will, but Ava had wanted nothing to do with it. Or our father. So I bought her out with my share of the inheritance and let our father stay there. I thought I was being kind. I thought I was honoring the concept of family. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, vibrating against the leather. I did not look at it, but I knew who it was. It was always him. My mind drifted back to where this nightmare began. It was not with an explosion or a scream, but with a Tuesday afternoon phone call. 3 months ago, the rain had been lighter that day. I was sitting at my desk, trying to finish a logo commission for a local coffee roaster. My apartment was quiet, the kind of curated silence I needed to work. When my phone rang, the screen lit up with the word Dad. I hesitated. I always hesitated. There was a knot that formed in my stomach every time Robert called, a mixture of hope and dread. I wanted him to call just to ask how my day was. I wanted him to be a father, but Robert only called when the world had failed to give him what he believed he was owed. I swiped the green button. "Hi, Dad," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Sky, my sweet girl. His voice boomed through the speaker, rich and warm like molasses. It was the voice he used when he was in a good mood. The charismatic baritone that could charm bank tellers and waitresses alike. I have fantastic news. You need to come over this weekend. We are having a celebration. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. A celebration? It is for Leo, he said, the pride in his voice so thick it was almost nauseating. My little champion is turning 1 month old on Saturday. Tiffany wants to throw a proper party. You know, introduce him to the world. A real family gathering. I stared at the ceiling. Tiffany was his new wife, a woman only 4 years older than me. Leo was their son, my half-brother. I had nothing against the baby, who was an innocent infant, but the entire situation felt like a slap in the face to my mother's memory. Robert had moved Tiffany in before the dirt on Mom's grave had even settled. That sounds nice. Dad, I lead. I will check my schedule. Do not give me that corporate talk. Sky, Robert chuckled. But the edge was there, the subtle demand buried in the joke. You are his big sister. You have to be there. And listen, I need a favor. A big one. There it was. The hook. What is it? I asked. I want your grandparents to come. I froze. My grandparents, the Grants, were old money. They were stiff, principled people who lived in a gated estate on Mercer Island. They tolerated me because I was their daughter's child, but they loathed Robert. To them, he was a grifter who had leeched off their daughter for 20 years. They had not spoken to him since the funeral. Dad, I said slowly, trying to be reasonable. You know they will not come. They do not. Sawijing howling. 2 hashes greater than they are not comfortable around Tiffany. They just do not know her yet. Robert insisted, his voice rising in pitch. And they have not seen Leo. Sky, listen to me. This is not about me. It is about the boy. He is their grandson too. Technically, he deserves to be recognized. He deserves to be part of the family trust. The family trust. The magical pot of gold that Robert had been trying to dip his fingers into for decades. My grandparents had set up educational trusts for me and Ava. Robert wanted Leo on that list. They are not going to come just because you send an invite, I said, my voice trembling slightly. That is why I need you to help me. Robert said, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Tell them it is for you. What? Tell them you are sick, or that you are in some kind of trouble and you need them to meet you there. Just get them to the house. Sky, once they see the baby, once they see how happy we are, their hearts will melt. They are old. They want connection. We just need to break the ice. I sat there, gripping the phone. He was asking me to lie. He was asking me to manipulate 2 elderly people who had been nothing but supportive of me, just so he could ambush them with his new wife and a demand for money. Dad, I cannot do that. I whispered, Is Sky, please, he said, and then came the guilt trip. The weapon he wielded with expert precision. Do you want your little brother to grow up with nothing? Do you want him to struggle like I did? I am trying to build a legacy here. I thought you were the one who understood me. Ava is cold. She is just like them. But you, So Yu Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than you have a heart. Do not let me down. I bit my lip until I tasted iron. I wanted to be the one with the heart. I wanted to be the good daughter. I remembered how he looked when he was stressed, the way his shoulders slumped, and a pathetic urge to fix things rose up in me. I had spent my whole life trying to fill the void inside him. trying to prove that I was enough to make him happy. Fine, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I will get them there, but I am not faking a sickness. I will tell them, 少于今后ling. 2 hash is greater than I will tell them. It is an emergency regarding the house title. Grandfather is a retired lawyer. He will come for legal matters. Robert let out a whoop of joy. That is my girl. That is why you are my favorite. You are brilliant. Sky, absolutely brilliant. We will fix this family yet. He hung up before I could retract it. I sat in the silence of my apartment, staring at the screen. I felt dirty. A heavy, sinking sensation settled in my chest. A primal warning that I was making a catastrophic mistake. This was a red flag. A giant, waving crimson banner. But I folded it up and tucked it away, telling myself that it was just a little white lie, that I was helping peace prevail. I did not know it then, but that phone call was the first domino. By agreeing to his scheme, I had not just told a lie. I had opened the door for a monster to walk right through and torch everything I loved. Back in the car, the rain hammered harder against the roof, sounding like gravel being thrown at metal. I looked at the burnt house again. The police tape snapped in the wind. I checked the time. I had a meeting with the insurance investigator in an hour. But before that, I had to do something even harder. I had to go back to the beginning of the end. The drive to Mercer Island always felt like crossing into a different country, as my tires hummed over the floating bridge, leaving the gray grit of Seattle behind. The air seemed to change. It became thinner, cleaner, and smelled of money. This was where the chaotic noise of the city died, replaced by the hushed, manicured silence of old wealth. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My stomach was doing somersaults, a nauseating mix of guilt and fear. I was about to look into the eyes of the 2 people who had provided the only stability in my childhood and lie to them. My grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor Grant, lived in a colonial estate hidden behind 10-foot iron gates and hedges that were trimmed with laser-like precision. It was a house that demanded posture, a house that did not tolerate dust, noise, or mistakes. When I pulled up the long gravel driveway, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked pale. My eyes were wide and frantic, betraying the turmoil inside. I took a deep breath, forcing a mask of composure onto my face. Just get them to the party. I told myself, do it for Dad. Do it for the baby. The housekeeper let me in without a word, leading me to the library. The room smelled of beeswax, lemon oil, and old paper. My grandfather sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a retired lawyer who still wore a suit and tie on a Tuesday afternoon. My grandmother sat in a wingback chair by the window, her posture rigid, her silver hair coiffed into an immovable helmet. Sky, grandfather said. He did not smile. He did not stand up. He peered at me over the rim of his reading glasses, his gaze sharp enough to cut glass. To what do we owe this sudden pleasure? I swallowed hard. The lie I had rehearsed a dozen times in the car suddenly felt flimsy. Hi, grandfather, grandma. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to come see you because 小于今后ling. 2 hash is greater than well. There is a situation with the house title, the one Mom left. I think there might be a lien I did not know about, and I was hoping you could come by this weekend to look at the paperwork. It is urgent. The silence that followed was deafening. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking the seconds of my humiliation. Grandmother turned her head slowly from the window. Her eyes were like ice, devoid of the warmth grandmothers are supposed to have. "Alien?" she repeated, her voice dry. "Yes," I stammered. "And since you are coming anyway, Dad, Robert, is having a small get-together, but the main thing is the legal issue. I really need your help." Grandfather, Arthur Grant leaned back in his leather chair. He did not look concerned. He looked disappointed. He removed his glasses and placed them on the desk with a deliberate click. "Sky," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Do you really take us for fools?" I froze. "No. Sao Jing Hao Lin? Jing Hao Da Yu. Your father called the club yesterday," Arthur interrupted, his tone hardening. He tried to leave a message for me at the front desk, bragging about some party for his new child. He was trying to bypass the screening process. When that failed, "He sent you." My face burned. I felt the heat rising up my neck, a flush of shame so intense it made me dizzy. I had been caught. Not just caught, but exposed as a pawn. Sao Jing Hao Ling. "Two hash is greater than I did not know," he called. I whispered, though in my heart, I knew it was exactly something Robert would do. "He is using you." "Sky," Grandmother said, her voice sharp. "He has always used you, just like he used your mother. He wants us there to legitimize this. Sao Jing Hao Ling. Two hash is greater than new arrangement of his. He wants access to the trust." I felt a surge of defensive anger. Not at them, but at the situation. Why did it always have to be about money? Why could they not just see that he was trying? He just wants his family together. I lead, even as my own mind screamed that she was right. "He wants you to meet Leo. He is your grandson too." Arthur opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax, an archaic touch that felt like a judgment. He slid it across the polished wood of the desk. "We will not be attending," Arthur said firmly. "We have no biological relation to that child, and we have no desire to be paraded around by Robert like prize poodles to impress his low-rent friends. This is our answer. Give it to him." I stared at the envelope. It looked heavy. "Please," I said, my voice cracking. "If you do not come, he is going to be devastated. He will be angry," Arthur corrected. "There is a difference." I took the letter. My hand was trembling. I realized then that I was not a granddaughter to them in this moment. I was a courier for the enemy. "Goodbye, Sky," Grandmother said, turning back to the window. "Do not let him drag you down with him, though I fear it is already too late." The drive back to my mother's house was a blur. My mind was racing, replaying the rejection over and over. I felt hollowed out. I had gone there to build a bridge, and instead, I had been handed a demolition order. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the contrast was jarring. The grass was overgrown. A plastic tricycle lay overturned on the walkway. The porch light was flickering, a bulb that needed changing weeks ago. I walked inside. The house smelled of stale formula and Tiffany's cloying vanilla perfume. Robert was in the living room, bouncing baby Leo on his knee. He looked up, his face lighting up with that $1,000,000 smile that had charmed my mother into an early grave. "Well?" he asked, his eyes darting behind me, as if expecting to see the Grants walking in with checkbooks in hand. "Did you get them? Are they coming?" I stood in the doorway, clutching my purse. The envelope felt like a brick inside it. "They are not coming." "Dad," I said quietly. Robert's smile faltered. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a sudden, sharp coldness. He stopped bouncing the baby. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low. "What did you tell them? Did you use the script I gave you?" "I did," I said. "I tried. But grandfather knew." "He knew you called the club." Robert's face twisted. "That smug old buzzard." I walked over and placed the cream-colored envelope on the coffee table. "They sent this." Robert stared at the letter. He handed the baby to Tiffany, who had just walked in from the kitchen, and snatched the envelope. He tore it open with a violence that made me flinch. As he read the letter, I watched the transformation. It was like watching a storm front roll in over a calm sea. His skin flushed red. A vein in his temple began to pulse, and his jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grinding. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, the explosion came. The arrogance. Robert roared. He crumpled the heavy paper in his fist and hurled a porcelain vase, which was one of Mom's favorites, across the room. It shattered against the fireplace, sending shards of blue and white ceramic skittering across the floor. "Robert!" Tiffany shrieked, clutching the baby. "They think they are better than me." Robert screamed, pacing the room like a caged animal. He kicked the coffee table, sending magazines flying. "Look at this. We respectfully decline any association with your current household." Respectfully. They are spitting in my face. He spun around and pointed a trembling finger at me. "And you? Hey." Hiss it. His eyes were wild, filled with a terrifying mix of hurt and hatred. "You let them do this." "Me?" I stammered, backing away. "Dad." I tried. They would not listen. "You did not try hard enough," he shouted, advancing on me. "You went in there weak. You let them look down on us. You let them insult your baby brother. Did you defend me? Did you tell them how hard I am working? No, you probably just stood there and nodded like a good little girl." I felt tears pricking my eyes. This was the cycle, the pattern I could never break. Whenever the world bruised his ego, I was the punching bag he used to regain his strength. "They despise me because I do not have their money," Robert ranted, grabbing a bottle of beer from the side table and taking a long, aggressive swig. "They think I am trash. And you know what, Sky? It hurts me that you still suck up to them. You are supposed to be on my side. I am on your side," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Then fix it," he snapped. He threw the crumpled letter at my feet. "You ruined this. Sky, you ruined Leo's big debut. Now I have to figure out how to pay for the caterer because I was counting on your grandfather's generosity to cover the deposit." The words hit me like a physical blow. "The caterer, you. Sao Ting Hao, Ling. Tu, you ordered a caterer?" I asked. "Of course I did." Robert threw his hands up. "I booked the best one in town. I wanted to impress them. Now what am I supposed to do? Tell them I am broke? Is that what you want? To see your father humiliated?" "No," I said softly. "Then make yourself useful." He growled, turning his back on me. "Get out of my sight." I stood there for a moment, looking at the shattered vase on the floor. It was a Ming replica my mother had bought in San Francisco 20 years ago. She loved that vase. Now it was just jagged trash, destroyed because a grown man could not handle the word no. I turned and walked out the door, the sound of Leo's crying echoing behind me. I sat in my car, shaking uncontrollably. My hands were vibrating so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. "He is just stressed," a voice in my head whispered. It was the voice of the enabler, the part of me that had been trained to smooth over the cracks. He is hurt. He just wanted a nice party. But another voice, quieter and darker, spoke up from the depths of my gut. He did not ask about you. He did not ask how the meeting went for you. He only cared about the money. I started the engine. I told myself I was leaving, that I was going home to my safe, quiet apartment. But deep down, I knew I was not going anywhere. The hook was already in my cheek. I felt guilty. I felt responsible. And Robert knew exactly how to pull the line. The first crack had appeared in the foundation, but instead of running for the door, I was already reaching for the spackle, desperate to patch it up before the whole house came down. The guilt was a physical weight. It sat on my chest like a wet wool blanket, heavy and suffocating, making every breath a conscious effort. 2 days had passed since I delivered the rejection letter from my grandparents, and 2 days had passed since my father had shattered my mother's Ming vase in a fit of rage. I should have stayed away. A rational person would have stayed away. A person with a spine would have looked at the wreckage of that vase and realized that the man who threw it was dangerous. But I was not rational, and I certainly did not have a spine. I was a daughter who had been conditioned for 26 years to believe that my father's happiness was my responsibility. When he was happy, the sun shone. When he was angry, it was because I had failed to clear the clouds. So, on a Thursday morning, I found myself driving back to my childhood home. I told myself I was going there to check on the house, to make sure the pilot light on the furnace was steady, or that the gutters were not clogged. But the truth was pathetic. I was going there to apologize. I wanted to smooth things over. I wanted to fix the mess I had not even made. When I unlocked the front door, the smell hit me instantly. It was the scent of neglect. The house, once pristine under my mother's care, now smelled of stale takeout food, dirty laundry, and that cloying, sugary vanilla perfume that Tiffany wore like armor. I walked into the kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dishes, crusted oatmeal stuck to bowls, and milk had soured in the bottom of glasses. Tiffany was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I entered, her eyes wide and rimmed with red, a performance ready to begin. "Sky," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Thank goodness you are here." She was wearing a silk robe that looked expensive, the kind that shimmered under the fluorescent kitchen lights. Her nails were freshly manicured, a stark white contrast against the dark screen of her phone. "Hi, Tiffany," I said, setting my purse on the counter. "Where is Dad?" "He is in the study," she said, gesturing vaguely down the hall. "He has been in there all morning making calls. He is trying to find a way to pay for the party." She let out a dramatic sigh and slumped forward, burying her face in her hands. "I do not know what we are going to do, Sky. We are drowning, absolutely drowning." I felt the familiar pang of sympathy. I rolled up my sleeves and started loading the dishwasher. "Is it the mortgage?" I asked gently. "It is everything," Tiffany sobbed, peeking at me through her fingers. "Diapers are so expensive. Formula is like liquid gold. We have been skipping meals just to make sure Leo has what he needs. Your father is too proud to tell you, but we are barely keeping the lights on." I scrubbed a plate harder than necessary. I felt terrible. Here I was, living in my quiet apartment with my steady freelance income, while my baby brother was apparently on the brink of starvation. "I can help with groceries this week," I offered, hating myself for it. "I can pick up some formula on my way home." "You would do that?" Tiffany asked, her face lighting up with a sudden, beaming smile. Oh, Sky, you are an angel. You are the only one who understands. Not like your sister. Ava treats us like we are lepers. She stood up and walked over to the refrigerator. I am going to put Leo down for a nap, she said. Could you finish up here? My back is killing me. Of course, I said as she turned to leave. The belt of her silk robe shifted, and I saw something peeking out from the pocket. It was a receipt. It fluttered to the floor as she walked away, landing softly on the linoleum. Tiffany did not notice. She disappeared down the hallway, humming a lullaby. I bent down and picked up the slip of paper. I intended to throw it in the trash, but the logo at the top caught my eye. It was from a high-end boutique downtown, a place where they serve you champagne while you shop. My eyes scanned the date. It was from yesterday. I read the item line. Italian leather tote, black, $1,200. I froze. The water in the sink was still running, warm over my hands, but my blood ran cold. $1,200. That was more than my rent. That was enough to buy a year's worth of diapers. My mind tried to reject what I was seeing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she bought it for someone else. But Tiffany had no friends with that kind of money. And she certainly had no job. She had just stood there, 5 feet away from me, crying about skipping meals, while a receipt for a handbag worth a mortgage payment was in her pocket. The dissonance made me dizzy. I turned off the faucet. The silence in the kitchen was sudden and heavy. I needed to ask her. No, I needed to ask Dad. Surely he did not know. Robert was bad with money. Yes, but he would not let his wife blow $1,000 while he was begging his parents for help. He was desperate. Not stupid. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked down the hallway toward the study. The floorboards creaked under my feet. The familiar sounds of the house I grew up in. The study was at the far end, a room that had been my father's sanctuary for as long as I could remember. The door was slightly ajar. I raised my hand to knock, but then I heard his voice. It was not the charming voice. It was not the angry voice. It was a voice I had rarely heard. A low, frantic hiss, dripping with fear. Listen to me. Sal, Robert said, you have to give me until Monday. Just until Monday. I stopped. My hand hovered inches from the wood. Sal? I did not know anyone named Sal. I told you. It is a lock. Robert continued, his voice rising in panic before dropping again. The old man is going to come through. I have the granddaughter working on him. She is soft. She will get him to sign the check. My heart hammered against my ribs. She is soft. He was talking about me. I pressed myself against the wall, making myself as small as possible. The air in the hallway felt thin. I know I am down, Robert said. I know. $40,000. I know the number. Sal, you do not have to remind me, but this trust fund, Saoyuting 2# is greater than it is real money, old money. Once the kid is on the list, I will have access to a stipend, a monthly draw. I can pay you back the principal plus the VIG within 6 months, $40,000. The number echoed in my head like a gunshot. 40,000. He was not behind on the electric bill. He was not struggling to buy diapers. He was in the hole to a loan shark or a bookie for $40,000. And the lie about the trust fund, Saoyuting 2# is greater than he was not trying to secure Leo's future. He was trying to secure a revenue stream to pay off a gambling debt. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Robert was pacing. Do not threaten me. Sal, he snapped, though his voice wavered. You come near this house, and the deal is off. The old man will not sign if there are goons on the lawn. You need me to look respectable. You need me to look like a loving father. So back off and let me work the mark. 2 hash is greater than the mark. That was what he called my grandfather. That was what he called his own family. We were not people to him. We were marks. We were targets. I felt bile rise in my throat. The image of Robert bouncing Leo on his knee, looking at me with those pleading eyes, suddenly twisted into something grotesque. Every smile, every compliment, every I love you. Sweet girl had been a calculation. He had sent me to my grandparents not because he wanted reconciliation, but because he needed a bagman to fetch his bailout money. And Tiffany, 2 hash is greater than she knew. She had to know. The crying, the poverty act. It was all part of the show, while he scrambled to cover his debts. She was spending whatever cash they had left on luxury goods, confident that I would swoop in to save them. I felt like the floor was tilting, my vision blurred at the edges. The betrayal was so sharp, so absolute, that I could not breathe. I had defended him. I had fought with my sister for him. I had lied to the people who raised me for him, and I was just a tool, a soft tool to be used and discarded. I heard Robert's footsteps approaching the door. Panic surged through me. If he found me here, if he knew I knew, the mask would come off completely. I was not ready to see what was underneath. I was terrified of the stranger living inside my father's skin. I turned and bolted. I moved as quietly as I could, my socks slipping on the hardwood. I made it back to the kitchen just as the study door creaked open. "Sky," Robert called out. His voice was back to normal, hearty and welcoming. "Is that you?" I grabbed my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. "2 hash is greater than I have to go." "Dad," I shouted, my voice cracking. I just remembered I have a deadline. A big project. I left the groceries on the counter. I did not wait for an answer. I ran out the front door, down the porch steps, and practically threw myself into my car. I locked the doors. It was an irrational reaction, because he was not chasing me. But I needed that mechanical click of the lock to feel safe. I stared at the house. It looked the same as it always had. The white siding, the green shutters, the oak tree in the front yard where I used to swing. But it was a lie. The whole thing was a stage set constructed over a pit of rot. $40,000. I gripped the steering wheel, gasping for air. The receipt for the handbag was still crumpled in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at it one last time. It was the physical proof of their deception. A small, thermal-printed anchor that dragged my reality down into the deep. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Robert. "Thanks for coming by. Honey, Tiffany said you were an angel. Love you." I stared at the words. Love you. For the first time in my life, I did not text back. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Robert was standing in the window, watching me go. He waved. A chill crawled up my spine. He looked like a predator watching a deer trot back into the woods, waiting for the right moment to take the shot. I drove for miles without knowing where I was going. I ended up in a parking lot overlooking the Puget Sound. The gray water churned below, mirroring the storm inside me. I should call the police. I should call my sister. I should call my grandparents. But I did not. I sat there, paralyzed by the enormity of the lie. The shame was paralyzing. How could I have been so blind? Ava had warned me. Grandfather had warned me. Everyone had seen it but me. You are soft, he had said. I looked at my reflection in the visor mirror. My eyes were wet, my face pale. Sibling. Zwei Raute ist größer als soft. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. The sadness was starting to recede, replaced by something hotter, something harder. It was a small spark of fury, burning in the pit of my stomach. He thought I was soft. He thought I was a fool. Maybe he was right, but even soft things harden when you burn them. I started the car again. I did not know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was not going to be his victim anymore. I was going to find out everything. I was going to dig until I hit the bottom of this hole he had dug for us, and if I had to break my own heart to do it, so be it. The blue light of my smartphone screen was the only thing illuminating my bedroom. It was 3 a.m. on a Friday, the kind of hour when silence feels heavy and thoughts turn into sharp, jagged things. I lay there, wrapped in my duvet, scrolling through a local community Facebook group called Moms of Queen Anne. I was not a mother, and I did not live in Queen Anne anymore, but I had joined years ago to find clients for my design business. Now, it was a window into the destruction of my reputation. The post had gone up 4 hours ago. It was from Tiffany. There was a photo attached. It was a black and white filter, artfully staged to look gritty and sorrowful. It showed baby Leo's hand gripping a finger, presumably Robert's. The caption was a masterclass in passive-aggressive victimization. It breaks my heart that some families value their bank accounts more than their own flesh and blood. We are just trying to give our son a warm welcome into this world. But the judgment from the upper crust relatives is overwhelming. We might not have millions in a trust fund, but we have love. Please pray for us as we navigate this bullying. No child deserves to be rejected before he can even speak. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me. The post did not name names, but in a tight-knit community like Seattle, it did not have to. The comment section was already on fire. Stay strong. Mama, toxic family is the worst. Who does that to a baby? Disgusting. If you need diapers or meals, send me a direct message. We take care of our own. I read the comments with a mixture of horror and fascination. Tiffany was painting a picture of a struggling, noble family being crushed by the heel of the elite. She was weaponizing the community's empathy. And the worst part? I knew the truth. I knew about the $1,200 handbag sitting in her closet. I knew about the $40,000 gambling debt my father was trying to cover up. But to the world, we were the villains. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me. It was Robert. I stared at the screen. He knew I was awake. He always knew. He had a sixth sense for my anxiety. I answered, my voice thick with sleep and dread. Sibling. Due cancelletto. E maggiore di hello? Did you see it? Robert's voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded breathless, like he had been running. I saw it. Dad, I whispered. They are crucifying us. Sky, he said. Not the people on the internet. I mean the neighbors. Mrs. Gable next door gave me a dirty look when I took the trash out. The whispers are starting. People think we are monsters because your grandparents slammed the door in our faces. You should not care what they think, I said, trying to summon the anger I had felt in the car yesterday. Dad, I need to talk to you about Sibling. I do not have time for a lecture, he snapped, cutting me off. Listen to me. Tiffany is a mess. She has not stopped crying for hours. She is saying her milk is drying up because of the stress. Do you want your brother to starve? Do you want him to suffer because you cannot get your family in line? The manipulation was clumsy, but it still hit its mark. He knew my weak spot was the baby. What do you want me to do? I asked, closing my eyes. I need you to say something. Robert said, you are the bridge. A sky. You are the only one who has a foot in both worlds. If you write something, just a little post supporting us, it will validate us. It will show people that we are not the bad guys. Dad, I cannot, I said, clutching the sheets. I cannot lie for you anymore. I am not asking you to lie. Robert roared, and I pulled the phone away from my ear. I am asking you to tell the truth, that we are a family who loves each other, that your grandparents are being cold and unreasonable. Is that a lie? Did they or did they not reject us? Technically, they rejected the situation, not the baby. But Robert never dealt in nuance. I stayed silent. Sky. His voice dropped to a whisper, trembling with faux vulnerability. If this party fails, if we are humiliated, Saoyuting Holing, Tuhash is greater than I do not know what I will do. I really do not. The darkness is coming back. Honey, I feel like I am standing on the edge. My heart stopped. He was alluding to his depression, to the dark periods he had during my childhood when he would disappear for days. It was the ultimate trump card. Do what I want, or I might hurt myself. I felt the walls closing in. I knew he was a liar. I knew he was a gambler, but I was also terrified that if I pushed him too hard, too fast, he would snap. I needed to buy time. I needed to keep him stable until I could figure out how to untangle this mess without getting anyone killed. Fine, I whispered, tears leaking from my eyes. I will write something. Thank you, baby. He breathed, the relief instantaneous. I knew I could count on you. You are the only good thing in this family. The line went dead. I sat up in bed, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I opened the Facebook app. My thumb hovered over the status update bar. I typed. I deleted. I typed again. I told myself I was doing this to de-escalate the situation. I told myself it was strategy. But deep down, I knew it was cowardice. I was 26 years old, and I was still afraid of my father's shadow. Saoyuting Haling. Tuhash is greater than I wrote. There are two sides to every story. My father and Tiffany are doing their best to raise a beautiful baby boy in a difficult situation. It is heartbreaking to see our family divided by misunderstandings and judgment. Please be kind. Leo deserves a village, not a war. I read it over. It was vague enough to not be a direct lie, but specific enough to validate Tiffany's narrative. It shifted the blame subtly onto the judgment of others, specifically my grandparents and Ava. I pressed post. The regret was instant. It felt like swallowing a stone. I tossed the phone to the foot of the bed and buried my face in my pillow. I wanted to scream. I had just publicly sided with a man who called his own father a mark. I had just betrayed the only people who had ever truly protected me. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was not Robert. The screen lit up with a photo of my sister, Ava, and me from 5 years ago. We were smiling, our arms around each other at her graduation. She looked so strong in the picture, so sure of herself. I stared at the ringing phone. I could not answer it. I physically could not swipe the button. What would I say? Sorry, Ava. I know Dad is a con artist, but he scared me. The ringing stopped. Then a text message appeared. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling so hard I almost dropped it. Ava. I saw the post. 3 dots danced on the screen. She was typing. I held my breath, waiting for the lecture, waiting for her to yell at me, to tell me I was an idiot, to demand I take it down. But the message that came through was not a lecture. It was far worse. Ava, I have spent 10 years trying to pull you out of the water. Sky, but I realize tonight that you are not drowning. You are swimming. You chose him. Again. Do not contact me. Do not contact Grandma and Grandpa. You made your bed. Go sleep in it. I stared at the words until they blurred. You chose him. I typed a reply. Ava. Wait. You do not understand. I found something out. Dad is in trouble. I hit send. Message not delivered. A red exclamation point appeared next to the text. She had blocked me. I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I tried calling the house line at my grandparents' estate. It rang once, then clicked over to a busy signal. They had unplugged the phone, or they had blocked my number too. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt vast and terrifying. I was alone. For the first time in my life, I was truly, completely alone. I had severed the lifeline to the sane world. I curled up into a ball, my knees pressed against my chest. The spiraling had begun. I was free falling into the darkness Robert had created, and there was no one left to catch me. Outside, the rain began to fall again, a relentless drumming against the window pane. It sounded like applause. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. The clouds were low and purple, threatening a storm that refused to break. Hanging over Seattle like a held breath, I drove to my mother's house in a daze. Since Ava had blocked me, I had moved through the world like a ghost. I had not eaten. I had barely slept. I kept replaying my sister's final text message in my mind, analyzing every syllable of her judgment. You are swimming. When I turned the corner onto the familiar street, I slammed on the brakes. I stared through the windshield, my mouth falling open. My mother's house, the modest, dignified craftsman bungalow where I had learned to walk, had been transformed into a grotesque parody of a country club. White silk tents erupted from the lawn like giant mushrooms. There were valets standing at the curb, wearing red vests, waiting to park cars that cost more than my college education. A string quartet was setting up on the porch, right next to the spot where Mom used to keep her muddy gardening boots. I parked my car down the street, feeling like an intruder at my own funeral. As I walked up the driveway, the smell hit me. It was not the smell of damp earth and rain that usually clung to this place. It was the smell of money, expensive cologne, roasting lamb, and the sharp, mineral tang of chilled champagne. Sky, there she is. Robert emerged from the crowd of caterers. He was wearing a tuxedo, not just a suit, but a full tuxedo with a satin lapel, looking like he was about to accept an Academy Award. His face was flushed with excitement, his eyes manic and bright. Does it not look magnificent? He asked, spreading his arms wide to encompass the circus he had erected on my front lawn. I looked at him. I looked at the waiters carrying silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling. How? So you think Ling, 2 hashes greater than. How did you pay for all of this? Robert laughed, a booming sound that made a passing waiter flinch. You worry too much. Sky, it is all taken care of. Investments are paying off. Besides, you have to spend money to make money. We have some very important people coming today. People who can help Leo. People who can help us. He gripped my shoulder. His hand was heavy. his fingers digging into my clavicle. "Just smile," he hissed, his voice dropping to that dangerous low register. "You are the hostess today. You are the proof that this family is solid. Do not embarrass me." He pushed me toward the tent. The guests began to arrive. These were not family friends. I did not recognize a single face. They were men in Italian suits and women with faces pulled tight by surgery. People who looked at the house with polite disdain, but drank the free champagne with enthusiasm. I stood by the beverage station, clutching a glass of water, trying to make myself invisible. I overheard a conversation between two men standing near the shrimp cocktail tower. "So, Robert says the Grants are finally backing him?" the first man asked, chewing on a prawn. "That is the rumor," the second man replied. "He told me the old man is sponsoring this whole shindig. If the Grants are involved, the venture capital must be secure. I might write him a check today." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just a party. It was a con. Robert was using the implication of my grandparents' presence to lure these people into investing in some non-existent business scheme. He had told everyone that Arthur and Eleanor Grant were hosting, that they were financing the event, giving his debts a veneer of legitimacy. I looked across the lawn. Tiffany was holding Leo, dressed in a white lace gown that looked like a wedding dress. She was beaming, playing the part of the doting mother, while Robert worked the room, shaking hands, clapping backs, collecting promises of money based on a lie that was about to collapse. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer audacity of his delusion. He truly believed he could get away with this. He believed that if he just smiled hard enough, reality would bend to his will. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The chatter under the white tent died down, rippling into silence like a wave crashing against a shore. The string quartet stopped playing mid-measure. I followed the gaze of the crowd toward the driveway. A black sedan had pulled up, blocking the valet stand. Behind it, the blue and red lights of a police cruiser flashed silently. Cutting through the gloomy afternoon light, my heart hammered against my ribs. The door of the sedan opened. My grandfather, Arthur Grant, stepped out. He was leaning on his cane, but he looked like a titan. He wore a charcoal overcoat and a fedora, his face set in a mask of grim determination. My grandmother, Eleanor, stayed in the car, her silhouette visible through the tinted glass, refusing to even set foot on the soil of this farce. Two uniformed police officers flanked Arthur as he walked up the driveway. Robert froze. He was holding a glass of champagne in midair, his smile frozen in a rictus of terror. Arthur stopped at the edge of the tent. He did not shout. He did not make a scene. He simply projected his voice with the courtroom authority that had made him a legend in the legal world. "Robert," Arthur said. The name hung in the air. "Dad," Robert stammered, his face draining of color. He tried to recover, putting on his mask again. "Everyone, look, my father-in-law has arrived. A bit late, Arthur, but we saved you a glass of Soyu Jinghao Ling. R. Jinghao Dayu." "Stop it," Arthur cut him off. The command was soft, but it cracked like a whip. Arthur reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. "I am here to serve you with a cease and desist order," Arthur announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent garden. "And to inform these officers that you have fraudulently used my name and my credit information to secure the services of these vendors." A collective gasp went through the crowd. The guests exchanged horrified looks. The man who had been talking about writing a check quietly slipped his checkbook back into his jacket pocket. Robert's face turned a violent shade of purple. You, Sao Jing Haling, 2# is greater than you are doing this now. He choked out, in front of everyone. You left me no choice. Arthur said coldly. You charged $20,000 of catering to my personal account this morning. That is identity theft. Robert, the only reason you are not in handcuffs right now is because my daughter, your late wife, would have been heartbroken to see the father of her children arrested at a birthday party. Arthur looked at the police officers. Officer, please escort everyone off the property. This gathering is an illegal assembly on a premise that is currently under investigation for credit fraud. The humiliation was total. It was absolute. The guests did not wait to be told twice. They scattered like cockroaches when the lights turn on, rushing for their cars, muttering curses, shooting looks of disgust at Robert and Tiffany. Robert stood in the center of the emptying lawn, trembling. The facade had crumbled. The charade was over. He turned to look at Arthur. His eyes were no longer the eyes of a man. They were the eyes of a cornered beast. You ruined it. Robert whispered, You ruin everything. You did this to yourself. Arthur replied, turning to leave. Robert let out a scream, a raw, animalistic sound of rage. He grabbed a bottle of champagne from a nearby table and hurled it at Arthur's retreating back. Look out, I screamed. The bottle missed Arthur by inches, shattering against the stone pillar of the gate. Glass sprayed everywhere. The police officers lunged forward, grabbing Robert by the arms. Calm down, Azur, or we will arrest you. Get off me, Robert shrieked, struggling against them. He looked wild, his tuxedo torn, his hair disheveled. He scanned the lawn, his eyes frantically searching for a target, someone to blame for his destruction. His eyes locked on me. I was standing near the porch, shaking, tears streaming down my face. You, Robert roared, pointing a trembling finger at me. The officers held him back, but his voice was a weapon that could reach me anywhere. You knew, he screamed at me. You set me up. You told them to come at this time. Did you not? You wanted to humiliate me. No, Dad. Sao Jinghao Ling, R. Jinghao Dayu. You ungrateful little traitor. He spat, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. After everything I did for you, I put a roof over your head. I loved you when you were nothing, and you side with them? You side with the people who think we are garbage? The venom in his voice was physically painful. It felt like being skinned alive. Tiffany was standing behind him, clutching Leo, her eyes darting around, calculating. She did not defend him. She did not defend me. She just watched, making sure she was not in the line of fire. Sky, Robert yelled, his voice cracking into a sob that was more angry than sad. You are dead to me. Do you hear me? You are not my daughter. You are just like them. Get out of my sight. The officers wrestled him toward the house to calm him down. Arthur looked back at me from the gate. His expression was unreadable. He did not beckon me to come with him. He got into his car and drove away. I stood alone in the wreckage of the party. The white tents flapped in the wind. Half-eaten shrimp lay on the grass. The smell of expensive champagne mixed with the ozone of the approaching storm. You are dead to me. The words echoed in the empty garden. Something inside me snapped. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. For 26 years, I had been the water. I had flowed around his rocks, filled his cracks, tried to smooth his edges. I had drowned myself to keep him afloat. I looked at the house, my mother's house. He had defiled it. He had turned her sanctuary into a crime scene of his own ego. I stopped crying. I reached up and wiped my cheeks. My hand was steady. The fear that had ruled my life. The fear of his anger. The fear of his abandonment. Evaporated. There was nothing left to fear. He had already done the worst thing possible. He had shown me exactly who he was. He was not a father in trouble. He was not a victim of circumstance. He was a cancer, and you do not negotiate with cancer. You cut it out. I walked to my car. I did not look back at the house. I did not look back at the man screaming in the living room. I sat in the driver's seat and unlocked my phone. I navigated to my contact list. I scrolled down to Dad. My thumb hovered over the screen. Delete contact. I pressed it. Then I opened the voice memo app. I hit record. I am going to document everything. I said to the empty car, every lie, every theft, every threat. I put the car in gear. The rain finally began to fall, washing the champagne from the driveway. But it could not wash away the resolve that had hardened in my chest. I was done being the daughter. Now, I was the witness. The silence in my apartment was louder than the storm raging outside. It had been 24 hours since the disaster at the party. Since my father had screamed that I was dead to him, I had spent the day sitting on my couch, staring at the blank television screen, feeling a phantom limb sensation where my family used to be. I felt lighter, yes, but also terrified. It is a strange thing to cut off a limb to save the body. You survive, but you are never quite whole again. Then, there was a knock at the door. It was 3 sharp, authoritative raps. I knew that knock. It was not a delivery driver, and it certainly was not a friend checking in. I opened the door. Ava stood there, shaking the rain off a black umbrella. She looked impeccable, as always, in a trench coat that probably cost more than my car. Her face was set in stone, her eyes scanning me with a mixture of pity and frustration. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. Ava did not hug me. She did not ask how I was feeling. She walked to the kitchen island, placed a thick manila envelope on the granite counter, and unbuttoned her coat. "I told you so," she said. "I know," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "You do not have to rub it in. I am not here to gloat." "Sky," she said, her voice softening just a fraction. "I am here because despite your best efforts to be an idiot, you are still my sister. And because I hired a private investigator 2 weeks ago," I stared at the envelope. "A private investigator?" Ava tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. "Grandfather suspected something was off about Tiffany. You know how he is. He does not trust anyone who smiles that much without showing their teeth. So, he footed the bill for a background check. A deep dive. I walked over to the island. The envelope looked innocuous, just a standard packet of documents. But the air around it felt charged with static. "What is in there?" I asked. "The reason why Robert is so desperate for money," Ava said, "and the reason why you need to stop feeling guilty for abandoning him." "Read it." I opened the clasp. My hands were steady this time. The numbness from the party was still protecting me. I pulled out a stack of papers. There were bank statements, credit reports, and grainy photographs of Tiffany meeting with a man in a parking lot. But the document on top was the one that made the room spin. It was a paternity test result. The header read, "Genetic Diagnostics Lab." The subject was Leo Robert Miller. The alleged father was Robert Miller. I scanned down to the bottom line. The bold text that usually delivers the verdict. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I read it again. 0%. I looked up at Ava, my mouth dry. He is not the father? I whispered. Ava shook her head. Tiffany has been seeing an ex-boyfriend on the side. A guy named Gary who works at a chop shop in Tacoma. The investigator got a sample from a pacifier Tiffany dropped in a park. It is a match for Gary. Not Dad. I felt a sudden, hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. He does not know. I said, "Oh my God. Ava, Dad does not know. He is destroying his life, alienating his parents, and committing fraud for a child that is not even his." Ava's expression remained grim. "That is what I thought too," she said, "at first, but keep reading." I flipped the page. It was a transcript of a text message conversation, retrieved from a cloud backup that the investigator had somehow accessed. The messages were between Tiffany and Robert. Tiffany, he is getting suspicious. He asked about the eyes again. Robert, it does not matter whose sperm made him. It matters whose name is on the birth certificate. Once the Grants sign the trust papers, the kid is a gold mine. Just keep your mouth shut and play the part, Tiffany. And if they find out, Robert, they will not, and if they do, I will claim we were separated during conception and we reconciled. The trust language is vague. Adopted or acknowledged children count. I just need the cash flow. I dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. He knows? I choked out. He has known the whole time. Ava said, her voice filled with disgust. He does not care. Of Sky. He does not love that baby. He looks at that innocent child and sees a lottery ticket. He accepted the affair because Tiffany promised him a cut of the money if they could scam Mom and Dad. I felt sick. Physically, violently sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched into the sink, my body trying to purge the toxicity of the truth. Robert was not a tragic figure. He was not a man blinded by love for a new family. He was a monster. He was willing to raise another man's child not out of charity, but out of greed. He had dragged me into his web, used my love, used my loyalty, all to facilitate a con. I washed my face with cold water. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back at me looked different. Her eyes were harder. The last vestige of the little girl who wanted her daddy's approval was gone, washed down the drain. I walked back out to the kitchen. I am going over there, I said. Sky, do not. Ava warned. It is over. Let the lawyers handle it. No, I said, grabbing my keys. He has something of mine. He has the deed to Mom's house. If he knows the gig is up, he is going to try to liquidate everything. I need to get him to sign the release before he burns the place down for insurance money. Ava grabbed my arm. He is dangerous. Sky, you saw him yesterday. He is unhinged. I am not afraid of him anymore, I said, pulling away. You can come with me if you want, or you can wait here. Ava hesitated, then grabbed her umbrella. I am driving, she said. The drive to the house was silent. The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering the roof of Ava's Mercedes. When we pulled up to the house, it looked like a shipwreck. The white tents from yesterday were collapsed in the mud, tangled masses of fabric and poles. The front door was wide open, swinging in the wind. We ran up the porch steps. Inside, the house was in chaos. Drawers were pulled out, contents dumped on the floor. It looked like a robbery, but I knew better. Robert was in the living room. He was stuffing silverware, Mom's antique silver set, into a duffel bag. Tiffany was nowhere to be seen. He looked up as we entered. His eyes were bloodshot, his face unshaven. He did not look surprised. He looked resigned, like a rat that knows the ship is sinking and is just trying to grab the cheese before jumping. "What do you want?" he snarled, not stopping his packing. "Come to gloat?" I threw the paternity test onto the coffee table. "We know, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "We know Leo is not yours. We know you are scamming the family." Robert paused. He looked at the papers, then let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "So?" he said. He zipped up the bag. "Does it matter?" The old man cut me off anyway. "The plan is dead." "You are disgusting," Ava said, stepping forward. "You were going to use a baby as a prop." "I did what I had to do," Robert shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "The world owes me. Your mother left me with nothing. Your grandparents sit on a mountain of gold and throw me crumbs. I was just taking what was mine." He picked up the duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. "I am leaving," he said. "Tiffany is already gone. She took the car and the jewelry. Smart girl, but I am not leaving empty-handed." He moved toward the door. I stepped in his path. "You are not taking Mom's silver," I said, "and you are going to sign the house over to me. Today." Robert stopped. He looked at me, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a man who has one card left to play. "You want the house?" he asked softly. "It is my house," I said. "You just live here, legally. Your mother left it to you." "Yes," Robert said, dropping the bag. "But you seem to forget, Sky, that I have been living here for 20 years. I have rights, squatter's rights, tenant rights. It could take you 2 years to evict me. 2 years of legal fees you cannot afford. I will find a way," I said. "Will you?" he asked. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and then turned it toward me. "Sojuting 2 Raute ist größer als I froze." On the screen was a photograph. It was from 4 years ago. It was a photo of me, sitting on a hospital bed, looking gaunt and hollow-eyed. My wrists were bandaged. It was taken the morning after I had swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills, during the worst depression of my life, which was a depression caused, in no small part, by his constant emotional abuse. "I took this when you were in the psych ward," Robert said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Remember? You were so fragile, so unstable." My breath caught in my throat. Ava gasped. "You monster." "Ava," he said. Robert ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "It would be a shame if this photo got out," he said casually. "And not just the photo. I have the intake forms. The doctor's notes detailing your Saoyuting howling, 2 dièse est supérieur à hallucination. Your breakdown." He took a step closer to me. "I heard you are up for a big promotion at that design firm. Be a shame if their human resources department received an anonymous email detailing how their star designer is a mental liability. Or maybe I should post it on LinkedIn. Or send it to your new boyfriend?" He was blackmailing me. He was using the lowest, most painful moment of my life, a moment where I had almost died, as leverage to steal a house. "Give me the phone," Ava shouted. Lunging for him, Robert shoved her back with shocking force. Ava stumbled and fell onto the couch. "Do not touch me," he roared. He turned back to me, his face inches from mine. I could smell the stale whiskey on his breath. "Here is the deal, Sky," he whispered. "You are going to sign a quitclaim deed. You are going to transfer the title of this house to me, full ownership. If you do that, I delete the photos. I disappear. You never have to see me again." "And if I do not?" I asked. my voice barely a whisper. Then I ruin you, he said simply. I will paint you as a drug-addicted, suicidal psycho who is unfit to work, unfit to love, and unfit to be part of society. I will make sure everyone knows you are broken. I stared at him, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had tucked me in at night. He was gone. In his place was a creature of pure malice, a parasite that would consume its host until there was nothing left. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was not a tear of sadness. It was a tear of mourning for the father I had wished for, finally acknowledging that he had never existed. Okay, I said softly. Sky. No, Ava cried out from the couch. I held up a hand to stop her. Okay, I repeated. I will sign. Just so you Disowned Ling. 2# is greater than do not post the photos. Robert smiled. It was a triumphant, predatory grin. Smart girl, he said. I knew you were the reasonable one. He walked over to the desk in the corner, which was the same desk where I had found the loan shark notes, and rummaged through a drawer. He pulled out a document. He had it ready. He had planned this. Sign here, he said, tossing a pen onto the table next to the paternity test. I walked to the table. I picked up the pen. My hand was trembling, but my mind was racing. I needed to buy time. I needed to get him to admit it on record. I looked at Ava. She was staring at me with wide eyes. I tapped my ear subtly. Record this. Ava's eyes narrowed. She understood. She slowly reached into her pocket. I will sign, I said, my voice shaking. But you have to promise me one thing. Anything. My dear, Robert said, watching the pen. Admit that you never loved Leo. I said, admit that you only wanted him for the money. Robert rolled his eyes. Oh, grow up? Sky, love does not pay the bills. Of course I wanted the money. That kid was a prop, just like you were a prop to get to your grandparents. Now sign the damn paper. I pressed the pen to the paper. There, he had confessed, but then I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It was the sound of tires crunching on gravel outside. Lots of tires. Robert heard it too. He turned toward the window. Through the rain-streaked glass, we saw 3 police cruisers pull into the driveway, lights flashing blue and red against the gray sky. Robert's face went white. You called them? He hissed, turning on me. I did not. I said honestly. Then who? So you, Disowned Ling, are Disowned Dayu. The front door kicked open. Police, show me your hands. Robert panicked. He looked at the back door. He looked at the duffel bag of silver. He looked at me, and in that split second, the entitlement vanished, replaced by the cornered ferocity of a wild animal. He did not raise his hands. He reached into his waistband. He did not have a gun, but he pulled out a long, rusty screwdriver he had been using to pry open the locked drawers. He lunged at me. He was not trying to escape. He was trying to punish me. If he was going down, he was going to take the traitor with him. Sky, Ava screamed. I saw the metal tip flashing toward my face. I threw my hands up, bracing for the impact, bracing for the final betrayal of the man who gave me life. The world went black, but not before I heard the deafening crack of a taser being deployed. The air inside the King County Superior Courtroom felt recycled, processed through 1,000 filters until it was stripped of all oxygen and hope. It smelled of industrial floor wax, style coffee, and the unique, sour perspiration of people who know they are about to lose everything. I sat in the second row of the gallery, my hands folded in my lap. I was wearing a navy blue blazer that I had bought specifically for this day, which was armor for the modern woman. Next to me, my grandfather, Arthur Grant, sat like a statue carved from granite. His cane rested between his knees, his knuckles pale as he gripped the handle. Ava was on my other side, her leg bouncing nervously, a kinetic release for the rage she was barely containing. We were not there for the assault charges. That was a criminal matter, scheduled for a preliminary hearing next month. Today was civil. Today was personal. Despite the restraining order and the pending felony charge for attacking me with a screwdriver, Robert had managed to find a lawyer. Not a good one, but a man named Barry Glazer who had billboards on the side of the highway advertising driving under the influence defense and slip and fall payouts. But a lawyer was a lawyer, and in the American legal system, anyone with a filing fee and a grudge could weave a nightmare. Robert sat at the plaintiff's table. He had shaved. He was wearing a charcoal suit that was slightly too large in the shoulders, giving him the appearance of a diminished, humble man. He kept his head bowed, studying the grain of the wood table as if looking for answers in the varnish. It was a performance. Every inch of him was a calculated performance designed to elicit sympathy from the Honorable Judge Sterling, a stern-faced woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. I looked at the back of his neck. I felt a strange, cold detachment. The terror I had felt in the living room when he lunged at me had calcified into something hard and sharp. I was not afraid of him anymore. I was studying him, the way a scientist studies a pathogen under a microscope. Look at him. I thought, he acts like the grieving father, the misunderstood patriarch, but he is just a parasite looking for a new vein. The bailiff called the court to order. Papers were shuffled, throats were cleared. Mr. Glazer, you may proceed with your motion, Judge Sterling said, her voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. Barry Glazer stood up. He was a sweaty man with a comb-over that defied physics. He hitched up his pants and walked to the podium. Your Honor, he began, his voice oily and loud. We are here today to rectify a grave injustice. My client, Mr. Robert Miller, has dedicated the last 20 years of his life to caring for the deceased, Margaret Grant Miller, and raising her children. He is a man of limited means who sacrificed his own career to be a stay-at-home father. Now, in his hour of need, he is being discarded by the very family he served. I felt Ava stiffen beside me. I placed a hand on her arm. Let him speak. I signaled. Let him dig the hole. We are petitioning the court for a constructive trust over the property located on Queen Anne Hill. Glazer continued, although the deed is in the name of the daughter, Sky, we contend that Mr. Miller contributed significant sweat equity and financial management that entitles him to a 50% ownership stake. Furthermore, we are filing a motion for spousal support from the estate of the late Mrs. Miller, arguing that the prenuptial agreement was signed under duress. It was a lie, a bold, flat-out fabrication. Robert had never contributed a dime to that house. My mother paid the mortgage, the taxes, and the repairs until the day she died. Robert's contribution was drinking her wine and gambling away her savings. But Glazer was not done. Additionally, Your Honor, we are filing an emergency petition regarding the minor child, Leo. I frowned. Leo? The paternity test had proven Leo was not Robert's son. Tiffany had fled the state with the baby weeks ago. What game was he playing? Despite the lack of biological connection, Glazer said, lowering his voice to a theatrical whisper, Mr. Miller is the psychological father of that child. He is bonded with him. He is seeking visitation rights and Sibling. 2 is greater than financial assistance from the family trust to maintain a relationship with the boy, as he has acted in loco parentis. Judge Sterling peered over her glasses. Mr. Glazer, am I understanding this correctly? Your client wants the grandparents, who have no biological relation to the child, and whose daughter is deceased, to pay your client to visit a child who is also not his. It is about the best interest of the child. Your Honor, Glazer said without missing a beat, the child deserves stability. The Grant family has the means to provide that stability. My grandfather let out a sound that was half sigh, half growl. Our lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Vance, who was no relation to my grandmother, stood up. Your Honor, this is frivolous, Miss Vance said calmly. Mr. Miller is a biological stranger to the child. He is a biological stranger to the assets he is claiming. This is nothing more than a shakedown disguised as a lawsuit. Judge Sterling nodded slowly. She looked like she agreed. I allowed myself a small glimmer of hope. Maybe it would end here. Maybe she would dismiss it all, and we could go home. But Robert was not done. He tapped his lawyer on the arm and whispered something urgent. Glazer nodded and turned back to the judge. There is one final motion, Your Honor, and it is a sensitive one. The room went quiet. I felt a prickle of dread crawl up my spine. We are formally requesting an exhumation order for the body of Margaret Grant Miller. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of my lungs. I heard grandfather gasp, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a physical blow. Ava gripped my hand so hard her fingernails cut into my skin. Excuse me? Judge Sterling asked, her eyebrows shooting up. Glazer cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, but he pressed on. My client contends that at the time the last will and testament was amended, giving the house solely to Sky, the deceased was not of sound mind. We have reason to believe she was being Sibling. 2 is greater than medicated, heavily, perhaps even poisoned. Poisoned? I whispered, the word escaping my lips before I could stop it. Mr. Miller believes that a toxicity analysis of the deceased's hair follicles will prove she was under the influence of narcotics that rendered her incompetent to sign legal documents. If that is proven, the will is invalid, and Mr. Miller, as the surviving spouse, would inherit the estate under the laws of intestacy. I stood up. I could not help it. My legs moved on their own. You liar! I screamed. My voice cracked, raw and high. You are the one who gave her the pills. You are the one who stressed her to death. Order. Judge Sterling banged her gavel. Order in the court. Sit down, young lady, or I will have you removed. Miss Vance pulled me back down into my seat. I was shaking. My vision was blurred with red spots. He wants to dig her up. He did not care about the truth. He knew my mother was not poisoned. He knew the will was valid. This was pure, distilled cruelty. He knew that the thought of disturbing Mom's rest, of dragging her body out of the earth to be sliced apart by a medical examiner, would break us. He was holding her corpse hostage. He was betting that grandfather would pay him millions of dollars just to let her rest in peace. I looked at Robert. He was not looking at the floor anymore. He had turned his head slightly, just enough so that I could see his profile. He was smiling. It was a small, tight smile. The smile of a man who knows he has found the nuclear button. I will ruin you, he had said. He was not just coming for my money. He was coming for my soul. Judge Sterling looked at Glazer with undisguised disgust. Mr. Glazer, that is an extraordinary request. You need extraordinary evidence to support it. You cannot just dig up a woman who has been dead for 5 years on a hunch. We have an affidavit, Glazer said, waving a piece of paper from a former neighbor who claims she saw Miss Skye giving her mother strange smoothies in the weeks before her death. It was insane. It was a fabrication so wild it should have been laughable. But in a court of law, even insanity has to be processed, filed, and argued. I am going to take this under advisement, Judge Sterling said, her tone icy. We will reconvene in 48 hours for an evidentiary hearing. Until then, the estate is frozen. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. Grandfather did not move. He sat there, staring at the great seal of the state of Washington on the wall, his face gray. He looked old. For the first time in my life, Arthur Grant looked frail. He is killing him, Ava whispered. He is actually going to kill him with this stress. We stood up. The bailiff opened the gate. I walked into the aisle. Robert was packing up his papers. He moved slowly, deliberately. As we reached the double doors at the back of the courtroom, Robert stepped into our path. Ms. Vance stepped in front of us. Mr. Miller, stay back. You have a restraining order. I am just leaving, Counselor, Robert said, holding up his hands. Just walking to my car. He looked past the lawyer. He looked straight at me. His eyes were wet. He summoned tears on command. A trick he had perfected over 2 decades. I just want what is fair. Skye, he said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. Why are you doing this to me? I am your father. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to drive. How can you be so cold? The gaslighting was breathtaking. Even after everything, after the screwdriver, after the paternity fraud, after the threat to exhume Mom, he was still trying to play the victim. He truly believed he was the injured party. In his twisted reality, we were the villains for not giving him what he wanted. I stepped around Miss Vance. I looked him in the eye. I was not the girl who cried in the car anymore. I was not the peacekeeper. You are not my father, I said. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of any warmth. You are a biological accident. You are a black hole that swallowed my mother whole, and now you are trying to swallow us. Robert's face hardened. The sadness vanished, replaced by the shark-like deadness I had seen at the house. You are going to lose. Skye, he whispered, leaning in so only I could hear. I will dig her up. I will scatter her bones if I have to, unless you cut the check. $2 million. That is the price for her peace. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but it was not fear. It was clarity. You think this is about money, I said. You think you can hurt me, but you cannot, because I know something you do not. Robert sneered. And what is that? I know you are afraid, I said. I saw your hands shaking when the judge mentioned evidence. You know that if you dig her up, if you really push for a toxicity screen, they might find traces of the painkillers you were stealing from her. They might find out why she really died so fast. Robert blinked. It was a subtle reaction, a microscopic flinch of the eyelid, but I saw it. I had guessed. It was a bluff, for I did not have proof he had tampered with her medication, but his reaction told me everything. Go ahead, Dad, I hissed. Day her up. Open that box. But remember, investigations go both ways, and I have nothing to hide. Do you? Robert's jaw tightened. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. Watch your back, Sky, he snarled. He turned and pushed past me, storming out into the hallway with his lawyer trotting behind him like an obedient dog. I stood there, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. Ava came up beside me. "Did you mean that?" she asked quietly. "About the pills? I do not know," I said, watching the heavy wooden doors swing shut. "But he does." Grandfather walked up to us, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw respect in his eyes. "You did well, Sky," he said. I did not feel like I had done well. I felt dirty. I felt contaminated by the proximity to such evil. But I also felt something else. I felt ready. He wanted a war? He wanted to drag us through the mud? Fine. I would get down in the mud with him. But I was not going to wrestle. I was going to drown him in it. I took Grandfather's arm. "Let us go home," I said. "We have work to do." We walked out of the courthouse and into the gray Seattle afternoon. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy. The battle lines were drawn. He had the audacity of the devil, but we had the truth. And as I would soon find out, the truth has a way of getting very, very ugly before it sets you free. News travels fast in a city like Seattle, but scandal travels at the speed of light. It started with a leak. I never asked Ava how she did it, and I never wanted to know. I suspected she had a contact at the courthouse clerk office. Or perhaps she simply tipped off a local legal blog that thrived on the misdeeds of the wealthy. However it happened, by Tuesday morning, the details of Robert's motion to exhume my mother were public record. The headline was grotesque, splashed across the screen of my laptop. "Local man seeks to dig up late wife in battle for trust fund." The reaction was immediate and visceral. The same community that had rallied behind Tiffany's tearful posts about mean relatives now recoiled in horror. There is a line in the sand of social etiquette. You can fight about money. You can fight about custody, but you do not disturb the dead, especially not a woman like my mother, who had chaired charity auctions and planted half the trees in the neighborhood park. I sat at my desk at the design agency, staring at the article. The comments section, once a source of anxiety for me, had turned into a firing squad for my father. Sibling, Dva, sick. Let her rest in peace. I saw this guy at the grocery store yelling at a cashier last week. He is unhinged. I should have felt triumphant. The narrative had flipped. The Moms of Queen Anne group had deleted Tiffany's original post and replaced it with a thread warning people about Robert's predatory litigation. We were winning the court of public opinion, but as I looked around the open plan office, I realized that winning the war did not mean I would escape the blast radius. My colleagues were avoiding me. Usually, the morning routine involved coffee runs and casual chatter about weekends. Today, heads ducked behind monitors as I walked by. The silence was thick, heavy with unasked questions. I was no longer Sky, the talented typographer. I was Sky, the daughter of the gravedigger. I was baggage. I was drama. My boss, a man who usually wore graphic tees and preached about bringing your whole self to work, called me into his glass-walled office at 10 o'clock. He did not offer me a seat. "Sky," he said, leaning against his standing desk. "We need to talk about the accounts. Is this about the deadline for the tech startup?" I asked, clutching my notebook. "I am on schedule. It is not about the work," he said, looking at a spot somewhere over my left shoulder. "It is about the Sibling, cucks, noise. We have had a few emails, clients. They are Googling the agency. And because your name is listed on our team page, The search results are getting messy. My stomach dropped. I am sorry, I said, my voice steady. It is a personal, legal matter. It will be resolved soon. I am sure it will, he said. But until it is, we think it might be best if you took some time, a leave of absence, just until the heat dies down. We cannot have our brand associated with Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than this kind of story. I looked at him. I had worked late nights for this man. I had saved accounts for him. But in the corporate world, loyalty is a one-way street. My father's toxicity was radioactive, and I was contaminated. I understand, I said, coldness settling in my chest. I packed my box in silence. I walked out of the building with my head high, but inside, I was burning. Robert had promised to ruin me, and even without posting the hospital photos, he was doing it. He was dragging me down into the mud with him, simply by existing. I drove aimlessly for a while, ending up in the parking lot of a grocery store near my mother's house. I needed to see it. I needed to see the physical manifestation of this nightmare. I pulled my hat down low and walked toward the house. The neighborhood felt different. The curtains in the windows of the adjacent houses were twitching. The neighbors were watching. They were the sentinels of suburbia, judging the show. When I got close to the house, I saw it. Robert was sitting on the front porch steps. He was alone. He held a beer bottle in his hand, though it was barely noon. He looked disheveled. His shirt was untucked, and he had not shaved in days. A car slowed down as it passed the house. The driver, a woman who lived 2 streets over, rolled down her window. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she yelled. Robert did not even look up. He just raised the beer bottle in a mock toast. I hid behind a large oak tree across the street, watching. He was isolated. The country club had suspended his membership, for Ava had made sure of that. His credit cards were likely maxed out or frozen by the court order. Tiffany was gone. His friends had abandoned him. He was a king in a castle of ash. Then, a white van pulled into the driveway. It had no markings on the side. I frowned. It was not a moving truck. It looked like a contractor or Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. Jinghao Dayu. A man got out. He was thick-set, wearing a leather jacket. He walked up to the porch. Robert stood up. They did not shake hands. The interaction was tense. Robert gestured to the door, and the man nodded. They went inside. My heart began to hammer. "Who is that?" I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The front door opened. The man in the leather jacket walked out, carrying something large wrapped in a blanket. It was rectangular, flat, a painting. My breath caught. It was the oil painting that had hung over the fireplace for 30 years. A landscape of the Cascade Mountains that my mother had bought on their honeymoon. It was not a masterpiece worth millions, but it was worth a few $1,000s. Robert followed him out, looking nervous. He scanned the street, checking for witnesses. The man slid the painting into the back of the van. He pulled out a roll of cash, thick, rubber-banded wads of bills, and handed it to Robert. Robert took the money and shoved it deep into his pocket. He looked desperate, hungry. He was selling the furniture. He was fencing my mother's legacy to pay off his debts. I reached for my phone to call the police, to report a theft in progress, but my finger hovered over the dial button. The police would take 20 minutes to get here. By then, the van would be gone, and Robert would claim it was his property to sell, dragging us back into a civil dispute that the cops would refuse to touch. I watched the van drive away. Robert went back inside. He was not stopping. I knew that look. That was the look of an addict who had found a vein. He would strip that house to the studs. He would sell the copper wiring if he could. I walked back to my car. My hands were gripping the keys so hard, the metal bit into my palm. The public fallout had destroyed his reputation, but it had also removed his last inhibitor. He had nothing left to lose. A man with no shame is the most dangerous creature on earth. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Monday is the deadline. If the money is not there, we come to the house. I stared at the screen. It was not meant for me. Then I realized we were still on a shared family plan. I had blocked his number, but the carrier settings were still linked in the cloud. I was seeing a synced message that had been sent to his number. We come to the house, the loan shark, Sal. The pieces clicked into place. The desperation, the exhumation threat, the selling of the painting. Robert was not just greedy. He was terrified. He owed $40,000 to people who broke kneecaps, and his grand plan to get it from the trust fund had failed. He was selling everything he could to stay alive. I lowered the phone. A cold realization washed over me. He was not going to leave. He was going to barricade himself in that house and feed it, piece by piece, to the wolves at his door. And when there was nothing left to sell, Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, R Jinghao Dayu. I looked at the house one last time. It looked dark, menacing. I drove away, but I did not go home. I went to a hardware store. I bought new locks. I bought heavy-duty deadbolts. I bought a can of pepper spray. The courts were too slow. The police were too bureaucratic. The public fallout had cornered the rat. And now the rat was eating the house. I had to go back in there. I had to confront him one last time. Not with a lawyer, but with the only language he understood. Sao Ting Haoling, 2 dièse est supérieur à force. I texted Ava. He is selling Mom's things. I am going there tonight. Do not try to stop me. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. The sky was darkening. The clouds were gathering again, heavy and black. It was going to be a long night. The rain had turned the world into a blur of charcoal and neon. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away from the house, hidden beneath the dripping canopy of an old chestnut tree. My engine was off. The only sound was the rhythmic drumming of water against the metal roof and the slow, steady thud of my own heart. I was not there to talk. I was not there to negotiate. I had called the police 10 minutes ago, reporting a burglary in progress. I told the dispatcher that I was the homeowner and that intruders were looting the property. I did not tell them the intruders were my father and his wife. I watched the house through the darkness. The downstairs windows were dark, but a faint, erratic beam of light danced across the living room curtains. Flashlights. They had cut the power, or the utility company had finally done it for them. I checked the canister of pepper spray in my pocket. My fingers traced the cold plastic trigger. Do not hesitate. I told myself, the man inside is not your father. He is a stranger wearing your father's face. I opened the car door and stepped out into the deluge. The cold water soaked through my coat instantly, but I barely felt it. I moved through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges, creeping toward the backyard. I knew every creak of the fence, every loose stone in the path. I was a ghost returning to haunt the living. I reached the back door. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Robert was too arrogant to believe anyone would come for him. I stepped into the mudroom. The air inside was stale and cold. It smelled of old dust and desperate sweat. I heard voices coming from the master bedroom down the hall. Hurry up. It was a woman's hiss. Tiffany. She was back. The cockroach had returned for the crumbs. Stop nagging me. Robert's voice was a guttural growl. I am trying to open the wall safe. The combination is sticking. I crept down the hallway, keeping my back pressed against the wall. The floorboards, usually so treacherous, seemed to conspire with me. Remaining silent under my wet boots, I stopped at the doorway of the bedroom. The beam of a heavy-duty flashlight cut through the gloom. Tiffany was standing by the bed, stuffing jewelry, which was my mother's costume jewelry, the pieces that were not even real gold, into a pillowcase. She looked frantic, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. Robert was on his knees in the closet, wrestling with the small wall, safe hidden behind the rows of empty hangers. He had already sold the clothes. The closet was bare. Come on, he muttered, slamming his fist against the metal dial. Sao Yu Tsing Hao Ling. Tu vois. Click, the safe door swung open. Robert let out a sound of pure triumph. He reached in and pulled out a thick envelope. It was the emergency cash fund my mother had kept for earthquakes or natural disasters. $3,000. It was all that was left of the family fortune. Got it, Robert breathed, clutching the envelope to his chest. Let us go. He turned around and shone the flashlight toward the door. The beam hit me. I did not flinch. I stood there, dripping wet, my eyes adjusting to the blinding light. Going somewhere? I asked. Robert froze. Tiffany let out a sharp yelp and dropped the pillowcase. Sky? Robert squinted, lowering the light slightly. What are you doing here? I stepped into the room. I live here, I said. The question is, what are you doing robbing my house? Robert laughed, but it was a jagged, nervous sound. Robbing? You cannot rob your own family. Sky, I am just taking what is owed to me for 20 years of service. Now get out of the way. We are leaving. He moved toward me, the envelope clutched in one hand, the heavy flashlight in the other. He looked like a cornered beast, eyes wild, teeth bared. Put the money back, I said calmly. Or what? Tiffany sneered from behind him. You are going to cry at us? Go write a poem about it. A loser. Robert took another step. He was 3 feet away. Move. Sky, he warned. I am not playing games. I have people looking for me. I need this money. You are not taking it, I said. Robert's face twisted. The mask of the loving father dissolved completely, revealing the violent, entitled narcissist beneath. I said move. He raised the flashlight like a club and swung it at my head. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the heavy metal arc through the air. I saw the intent in his eyes. He was not trying to scare me. He was trying to hurt me. He was trying to clear the obstacle. I ducked. The flashlight grazed my shoulder, sending a shockwave of pain down my arm. But I kept my footing. I pulled the pepper spray from my pocket. I aimed for his eyes. I pressed the trigger. A stream of orange chemical fire erupted from the nozzle. It hit Robert square in the face. He screamed. It was a sound I had never heard a human make. A raw, high-pitched shriek of agony. He dropped the flashlight and the money, clawing at his eyes. He stumbled back, crashing into the wall. My eyes. You bitch! You blinded me, Tiffany screamed too. But she did not help him. She did not rush to his side. She saw the envelope of cash lying on the floor. She lunged for it. I stepped on the envelope. Tiffany looked up at me. Her face was a mask of greed and fear. Let me have it, she begged, her voice cracking. He is crazy. I have to get away from him, then run. I said, coldness radiating from my chest. Run without the money. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Blue and red lights began to flash against the bedroom window, cutting through the darkness. Tiffany looked at the window, then at the money, then at me. She made a choice. She scrambled backward, grabbed her purse, and bolted out the door, leaving her husband writhing on the floor. I watched her go. I did not chase her. She was irrelevant. I looked down at Robert. He was curled into a fetal position, sobbing and cursing, rubbing his burning eyes. "I did everything for you," he screamed, his voice thick with mucus and tears. "I tried to build an empire for us, and you betrayed me. You are evil. Sky, you are evil." I stood over him. I felt a strange hollowness. There was no triumph. There was no joy. There was just the grim satisfaction of ending a sickness. The front door kicked open downstairs. "Police, is anyone inside?" "Upstairs," I shouted. 2 officers burst into the room, guns drawn. They saw me standing there, hands raised. They saw Robert on the floor. "Drop the weapon," one officer yelled, pointing at the pepper spray canister. I dropped it. It clattered on the hardwood floor. "He attacked me," I said, my voice flat. He broke into the safe. The officers moved in. They grabbed Robert, hauling him to his feet. He was still screaming, his eyes swollen shut, red snot running down his face. "She assaulted me," Robert yelled as they cuffed him. "She is crazy. Arrest her." The officers ignored him. They had seen the broken safe. They had seen the flashlight. They knew the drill. I watched them drag him out of the room. As he passed me, he stopped struggling for a second. He turned his head toward the sound of my breathing. "You are going to rot in hell for this," he whispered. I did not answer. I watched his back disappear into the hallway. I was alone in the room. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a deep, bone-crushing exhaustion. My shoulder throbbed where the flashlight had hit me. I looked around the bedroom. My mother's room. It was trashed. The mattress was overturned. The drawers were pulled out. The safe was gaping open like a wound. I walked over and picked up the envelope of money. $3,000. The price of a family. I sat down on the edge of the bed frame. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the footprints in the mud. But inside, the stain was permanent. An officer walked back into the room. He lowered his flashlight. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need a medic?" I looked up at him. I tried to speak, but my throat was closed tight. I shook my head. "We got him," the officer said gently. "He is in the car. He has outstanding warrants for fraud and gambling debts. He is not going anywhere for a long time." Saluting Haoling. 2 hashes greater than I nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. The officer left me to take my statement later. I sat there in the dark, listening to the fading sirens. The nightmare was over. The monster was in a cage. But as I looked at my hands, I saw they were shaking uncontrollably. I had won. I had saved the house. I had protected my mother's legacy. But as I sat in the wreckage of my childhood, I realized that Robert was right about one thing. Something inside me had rotted. The soft, hopeful part of my heart had died tonight, killed by the hand of the man who was supposed to protect it. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain. It sounded like static. It sounded like the end of the world. 3 months have passed since the night the blue lights flashed against my bedroom window. The seasons have turned, shifting from the relentless gray of the Seattle winter to the tentative, pale green of early spring. The contractors finished the repairs on the house last week. The wall in the master bedroom has been patched, the safe removed, and the smell of fresh paint has finally masked the lingering scent of stale fear and pepper spray. I stood in the center of the living room. It was empty. I had sold the furniture, not because I needed the money, but because I could not bear to look at the couch where Robert had sat, or the table where he had lied. The room echoed with a hollow, resonant sound every time I shifted my weight. Technically, I had won. Robert pleaded guilty, faced with the overwhelming evidence of the assault, the fraud, and the paternity test. His public defender advised him to take a deal. He was sentenced to 5 years in the state penitentiary for aggravated assault and grand larceny. Tiffany was never charged. She vanished into the ether, likely surfacing in another state with a new name and a new mark, leaving her fake life behind as easily as she had dropped that pillowcase of jewelry. I walked to the fireplace. The mantel was bare. The spot where my mother's landscape painting had hung was just a lighter square on the wall, a ghost of what used to be. I looked at the coffee table, the only piece of furniture I had kept. On it sat 2 documents. The first was a letter from my grandfather's law firm. I picked it up. The paper was heavy, cotton bonded, expensive. It detailed the new arrangement. Arthur and Eleanor Grant had paid for my legal defense. They had saved the house, but there was a cost. The trust previously designated for Sky Miller is hereby restructured. The legal jargon read, due to a demonstrated lapse in judgment regarding family assets, all distributions are suspended until the beneficiary reaches the age of 35. As subject to review by the board, I ran my thumb over the embossed seal. They had protected me. Yes, but they had also judged me. In their eyes, I was the fool who let the wolf in. I was the weak link who had almost lost the legacy. We still spoke, but the conversations were brief, polite, and colder than the Puget Sound. I had my inheritance, but I had lost their respect. I was safe, but I was on probation. I put the legal document down and picked up the second item. It was a standard envelope, thin and cheap. The return address was stamped in red ink. King County Correctional Facility. Inmate Robert Miller. It had arrived this morning. I had spent 3 hours staring at it. I told myself I should shred it. I told myself that reading it would only open the wound. But curiosity is a cruel master, and the need to know if there was even a shred of remorse inside him was overpowering. I tore it open. The letter was written in pencil on yellow legal pad paper. The handwriting was jagged, pressed hard into the page. My dearest Sky, it began. I felt a phantom shiver crawl up my spine. I have been doing a lot of thinking in here. It is hard. Sleeping on a cot, eating slop. I think about you every day. I know you are angry. You have every right to be confused. The police, the lawyers, they twisted everything. They made me look like a monster. I leaned against the cold brick of the fireplace. He was still doing it, even from a cage. He was spinning the narrative, but I want you to know that I forgive you. The letter continued. I laughed out loud. The sound was harsh in the empty room. He forgave me? I know you were brainwashed by your grandparents. I know you did not mean to pepper spray me. That was the fear talking. I did everything for you. Sky, I wanted to get that money so we could all be happy. I wanted to give you a brother. I wanted to secure our future. Was it a crime to love my family too much? I scanned down the page. The manipulation was clumsy, pathetic. It was the desperate flailing of a man who could no longer control his reality. I am willing to put this all behind us. He wrote, I am your father. You are my little girl. Blood is thicker than water. We can rebuild. I will be out in 3 years with good behavior. And then, the kicker, the punchline of the joke that was my father. I am having a hard time in here. Honey, the food is terrible and I need toiletries. If you could put $500 in my commissary account, it would show me that you still care. Just a little help for your old dad. I know you have access to the house equity now. Do the right thing. Saoyudzing Ling. Dve. Love. Dad, I lowered the letter. $500. After trying to steal the house. After threatening to dig up my mother's corpse. After attacking me with a screwdriver. He still thought he could ask for $500. He still thought I was the soft, desperate girl who would pay any price for a crumb of affection. He was wrong. That girl died the night she pulled the trigger on the pepper spray. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a lighter. I did not hesitate. I flicked the wheel, and a small, yellow flame danced into life. I held the corner of the letter to the fire. The cheap yellow paper caught instantly. The flame curled upward, turning his lies into black ash. I watched the words, love, Dad turn brown, then crumble into nothingness. I dropped the burning paper into the empty fireplace and watched it shrivel until it was just a pile of gray dust. I did not cry. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was not happiness. It was not relief. It was the cold, hard armor of adulthood. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting a weak, watery light on the pavement. I was alone. My family was shattered. My grandparents were distant strangers. My sister was wary of me. My father was in a cell, but the house was mine. The locks were new, and for the first time in 26 years, the door was shut, and I was the only one holding the key. I turned away from the window, picked up my purse, and walked out of the house. I locked the deadbolt behind me with a solid, final click. It was time to start living.